I'm going to pass it over to President Jim.
Thank you, Laurel. Good afternoon, welcome to this dialogue. I am very much committed to be working with you. You are our partners, you are our friends, you are our supporters. And sometimes you support us with very critical comments. That is something which we need. We may not agree on each and everything, but your critical comments on what we do will be very important for us to help us keep cool-headed, to help us understand that there are always difficult issues to address. There are always difficult problems to tackle. You may know something about my background if you spend a little bit of time Googling me. I spent 10 years in rural China. I worked on the land. I grew rice, wheat, cotton. I'm proud to say I can do all kinds of farming. And what is most important, I know the aspirations, the dreams of the local people, poor people in China before the opening up. The living standards were very poor, no access to electricity. I worked under kerosene lamps for a good 6 years. So I know the dreams of these people, and after I left rural China, I worked in the poor areas in China, I worked in poor areas in Asia. I went to virtually all the corners of Asia. I went to Sri Lanka when the war was still going on. I went to Afghanistan. That kind of experience helped me to understand how important it is to work with you. I can assure you, as we move forward, while we will try our very best to address all the problems, we will make some of the mistakes. But we will try not to make big mistakes, and we will not try to make the same mistakes twice. So I can assure you, I fully understand, only by working with you could it be possible for us to maximize our development impact and minimize mistakes, errors, troubles. This is our solemn commitment. Why we would like to create a new bank with a 21st century governance? Because we believe we are already in the 21st century. We need to learn from the experience of existing MDBs and with our own contribution, doing something new. It's not possible for us to have very close understanding of the local conditions in which we work. It is not possible for us to achieve success without the full support of the local people, without full support of you, NGOs, CSOs. You are the best guardians for the investment programs we are going to make. So please feel free. I can assure you, I will never ever take any offense if you criticize us. I know you do this all with a very good intention. I think this is the only way we can make sure we work for the same shared purpose. Sometimes people are very much critical of the NGO CSOs, just as you are critical of the MDBs, right? You know why? Because they don't understand your concerns. I understand your concerns because you want to make sure MDBs will do a good job. You want to make sure the governments will do a good job. Likewise, the MDBs and governments need to understand your concerns. So sometimes overshooting a little bit is no problem. Our team are all very much committed. Mr. Joachim Ansberg has long experience in the World Bank. I'm very happy to have him moving from Washington to stay in Beijing. I'm very happy to have Vice President Pandian, our Indian national. He has a rich experience in his own country. So we have very good team. I think the striking feature of this team that we are all of us willing to listen. We touch the ground. We understand how important it is to promote the broad-based economic and social development. We know no institution is perfect, but as long as we are willing to listen, we are willing to correct our mistakes, we are willing to change, we can do the maximum in achieving the common objective. So my words just like to show you I'm your friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Jin. And we had a couple of pre-requests for questions. So first, can I have the mic passed to Mr. Jean-Guy Carrière? Can we have the microphone?
Good afternoon, President Jin, your colleagues. Again, my name is Jean-Guy Carrière. I'm Executive Chairman of the Silk Road Chamber of International Commerce. I'm a former Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, which is based in Paris, and is the biggest business organization in the world. So obviously I represent a good part of the international business community at this meeting. And in that respect, there is a tremendous amount of fascination and interest in One Belt, One Road, obviously, and the AIIB in particular is lending a great deal of credence to that whole initiative, and also a great deal of bafflement, which I'm sure you also encounter. So one of the tasks we set ourselves in founding this World Chamber of Commerce at the same time that the AIIB was born 2 years ago is to try to be an intermediary between the bank, between One Belt, One Road funding sources, other banks and so forth, and the business community. Because again, if we're looking at, and we are, at an initiative which is extremely, almost colossally ambitious, of spending trillions of dollars over the next several years per year to build infrastructure, but you know, that's banal. We're looking at raising the living standards of hundreds of millions of people in Central Asia, in Africa, and other parts of the world. That's really what this is about. And Asia has done that successfully over the last 30 years. And I think that we in the business community take a tremendous amount of heart in the fact that now it is spreading its possible benefits much broader. And in that sense, again, we're looking at trillions of dollars of investment. Obviously, a lot of that is going to have to be private sector money. It's going to have to come from businesses and from institutions in the private sector to achieve that amount of investment. And that is one of the jobs we want to perform, is to try and work with the bank, work with other organizations to try and bring business to participate in this massively. And I say business, and it isn't just, we're not talking about Asian business, we're talking about the world. We're talking about, you know, we have, we represent now national chambers of commerce and business organizations, you know, from Russia to Mexico. 75 countries in total who have joined our membership since we started in December 2015. So you're beating us in terms of membership, but we're about equal in terms of 80 for AIIB, and we're 75 countries. I won't go on much longer, except you know that the creation of the AIIB, again for business people who tend to favor a multilateral approach to dealing with the world's problems, is a very encouraging sign. It is the most significant multilateral organization created since the WTO, and we know what's happening there. So I mean, it's an encouraging initiative to put forward a new successful multilateral group. And the One Belt, One Road, frankly, many of us are convinced that it will be the most significant development initiative in human history in the course of time that it's going to be implemented. And so again, it's going to affect the lives positively, we hope, of tremendous numbers of people. I will stop there. I think that the business community will get involved with One Belt, One Road projects, with AIIB and so forth, always on the basis of confidence. There has to be confidence that there's something solid, that there are standards which are international, which are...
Sorry, Mr. Curry, if you have a question for President Jin, just because we have...
Yes, well, I think the question is when we speak with business people about the soaring ambitions of the bank and of the OPUR, they say, but there are only 100 people, and they only have $100 billion US. And I guess my question is, you know, what would you answer to the question, how are you going to scale that up in a credible way?
Finally, the question. Thank you very much. I think the prelude in your speech is also very much important, but I fully agree with you that we need to create such a bank with the 21st century governance, creating the 21st century, and the first MDB, multilateral institution since WTO. So we stick to multilateralism. Multilateral institution does not mean that only the governments are interpreted as multilateral parties. You are part of the multilateral parties. So it calls for the concerted efforts for us to create, develop, and maintain the multilateral spirit of this institution. I fully agree with you. Confidence is important. Now, Chinese leader initiated One Belt, One Road, and also AIIB. There's some confusion about these two initiatives. One Belt, One Road is an appeal to all of the countries covering wide geographic area and working together. So lots of projects in all those One Belt, One Road countries actually are far away from China, right? But Chinese leaders' idea is not to achieve some self-interest, as President Xi elaborated, for win-win-win, right? It's for peace and prosperity. So that's the Belt Road. For this bank is a multilateral development institution with now 80 members. So we work in our member countries, both Asian and non-Asian, both developed and developing. But of course, just because we have large number of members who are of the Belt Road geographic area, definitely the projects they finance would be probably something for us to consider. 3 basic requirements must be met before we can consider financing. First, financial sustainability. Second, environmental friendliness. The third, the local people's acceptance. Failing any one of this, we will not do it. Now, talking about the confidence, either in Belt Road or this bank, it depends on what you achieve. When this bank was first, the conceptualizing was first initiated, there were lots of questions about the governance of the institution, whether this could be bureaucracy, international bureaucracy, whether China would dominate the managing of this bank. There were lots of questions. I was involved in the very beginning, starting from day one, negotiating about Articles of Agreement, other basic documents. I have 6 years of experience on the board of the World Bank, 5 years in the management team of AIIB, 5 years in China's Sovereign Wealth Fund, 3 years in a Chinese company, apart from my life in the Chinese Ministry of Finance. So I really spend a lot of time thinking about the new bank, China Development Bank, more than $300 billion. How about China Exim Bank, more than $200 billion? These two banks have assets which is more than the combined assets for all of the MDBs. $100 billion, how much you can do. But we believe the importance, the contribution of a bank does not depend only on its size. It's the role model. Just as the greatness of any person is not determined by his or her height, the greatness of any institution is not determined by the size of its assets or capital. So we just want to have an approach to development, $100 billion. But if we can mobilize the support, private sector, which, you know, we have more than 2 trillion private sector money floating around the globe every day. How much we can do? We now have a little bit over 100 professionals, staff working in institution. When we develop, we certainly will grow. We will have more people. But the size of the staff of this institution must be based on the work we can accomplish on the ground. So I'm looking at the per capita productivity in our institution. I promise to the board, in 3, 4, or 5 years' time, we will show you the scorecard. What is the productivity of the staff, per capita staff, in our institution? So I cannot tell you how many people eventually we will have, how much we can do. So I think the essence of creating such an institution is to explore the possibilities of meeting the needs of our member countries in the 21st century, particularly at a time when we are trying our very best to implement Paris Agreement, to help those countries realize their nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. So if we can use the limited resources to push the countries back on the road to low carbon economy, we can achieve a lot. So that is our idea. Of course, financial resources are important, but I'm sure if we do a good job, we can help mobilize vast number of financial resources in Asia and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, President Jin. Do we have someone from the Bank Watch Caucus, Ms. Manana? Right. If we have the...
Thank you, Mr. President, for the meeting with us, and thank you for your commitment to the Paris Agreement and the energy strategy. Your words yesterday that the bank would not finance the coal while it's not in a strategy, but we hope that this bank will really show the championship in this area. We also like that yesterday when you have the speech, you stressed that no new hydro would be, greenfield projects would not be done unless they are non-multi-purpose, and maybe you will do the extension and rehabilitation of the old facilities. It's very good that as the criteria for sustainability of the project, you choose the environmental friendliness and acceptance of the project by local community. Said all of this, I should admit that last month we have been very, very surprised when we suddenly found out that in Georgia we have the large hydro 208 megawatt dam will be constructed, greenfield project, absolutely. And the problem is that the local communities are quite resistant to that NESCRA project. There is quite some concerns about the biodiversity impacts and the issues already taken to the Berne Convention, on the biodiversity. So there is a number of the other challenges. We discussed it with the management, but still, can you give us the idea how the projects can get on officially on your pipeline, which does not meet all those criteria you just mentioned, including the NESCRA? Thank you.
Thank you very much. With regard to the energy strategy, this is the result of the concerted efforts of so many stakeholders. And I would say this is the best we can possibly achieve, meeting the concerns of all the different parties. I've told you that we don't have coal projects in our pipeline, and we would not consider anything which would have environmental impact or creating reputation risks for our institution. We implement Paris Agreement, and we help the countries to work on the nationally determined contributions. We are firm on this, please rest assured. With regard to hydro, to my knowledge, I think the hydro is still a little bit controversial, but because of the concern over climate change, there are more people who seems to be in favor of having hydropower, except large hydropower stations which have huge environmental impact, which would create ecological imbalance, something of that kind. Given my knowledge about the hydros, I think a smaller, medium-sized, particularly run-of-the-river hydros, certainly could be considered. They could also have some side effects, but balanced out, probably a lot of people, majority of people would think it could be considered. Large new hydropower stations, I think we have to be very, very careful. Now, as for the projects in our pipeline, we have to plan 3, even 4 years ahead. The project in our pipeline does not mean they definitely have to be done, regardless of its feasibility, regardless of the impact on the environment. So we would look at all those projects in the pipeline. As I said, if they fail to meet our standards, we have no problem dropping them. Okay. So I think it's still very early in the stage for us to come to conclusions whether the project could have serious problems. But as I promised, we'll be very much willing to listen, and we would reach out to you to discuss with you if there's any problems. I'm sorry I have to leave, but I have 2 very competent vice presidents that can answer questions much, much better than I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Jin. So we're going to move on to talk a little bit about transparency. So what I wanted to do right now was to give you an update, in particular about sort of where we are with our public information policy. As you know, it's interim at this point in time. We think we've had some very good engagement so far. We've received very high quality feedback from a number of groups about our information policy, some very helpful perspectives. We will be launching a review of our interim public information policy. We did want to let you know that there will be public consultations that will be open, so please keep an eye out on our website where we'll be announcing how those will be engaged. The approach that we will be using for the consultations will probably be pretty similar to what you've seen us do so far with the environmental and social framework and with the energy strategy. We feel that's been we've gotten really high quality feedback from a number of different groups. We found it very useful and again, very effective for us to use. I know that currently CEIU is using a similar approach for the complaint handling mechanism, so look for it to be a similar approach. Things that we're going to be considering as part of that, obviously, an inclusion versus exclusion list. What's our escalation process? What's our complaints process? So we're going to be examining all of that as part of our transparency in our public information review. So at this point, I know there were a few questions that people had about transparency, so I did want to sort of open the floor, and you can address those questions to me about the policy itself, but if you have questions about the projects, Dr. Pangdon is here, and feel free to address them to him as well. So I'm going to call upon Ryan, right up here in the front, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I was actually looking forward to speak to President Jin, but the window of opportunity is gone because I think our friend from the private sector ate up a little bit of our civil society time. No offense, but it's a habit for the private sector to encroach civil society space. Okay, jokes apart, I'll go straight into some of the key concerns. Firstly, it's a question of why talk to civil society. And where did we start from? I remember the first annual meeting, I struggled to get the microphone to get a word in with President Jin. From there to here, I think we've come a lot of constructive steps forward. I remember meeting Vice President Amsberg in Beijing, having a very good discussion over the energy strategy. A few of our comments have also made it in there, so this is good, this is positive, and I think we can work with that moving forward. In terms of the question of engagement with civil society, the question remains. AIIB headquarters is based in Beijing. The current legislative baseline between China and the rest of the world makes it difficult to engage with operations and management of the bank. So that's the elephant in the room. As civil society, we have to recognize it, and we have to look towards AIIB to see it step out of Beijing and finding creative ways so that it engage with civil society in policy and strategy dialogues. On the issue of information disclosure, the lending portfolio is moving faster than the information is being released. There is no way to sugarcoat that. So we need to get project information from the feasibility study stage all the way to post-implementation in the public domain. And I know there's not enough staff in place, but Laurel's office is trying really hard, and we're going to work closely together to make sure the information gets there. But as Manana's situations arising in co-financing, you realize it's just not information. Information is the bloodline of accountability. We need those EIAs, those SIAs as fast as possible. In terms of the accountability mechanism, there are three key issues here. It's independence of the mechanism. We're engaging with the AIIB mechanisms, the IFC, the World Bank. The question is, the mechanism has to be independent of management to look at it objectively, find issues of non-compliance, and raise it at the board level. So as civil society, we do reach out to the board as well, and we have conversations at different multilaterals, and we ensure and we hope that the mechanism reports directly to the board and remains free of management influence in order to do its job, unless the bank provides us security and anonymity, including requesting information anonymity, which is the first step before we can consider grievances. The third point on accountability mechanism is the remedial fund. We've been running from borrower to bank time and again after the project has done its impact, looking for the money to help the people who are most affected. AIIB has an opportunity to fix this early on. Looking at the loan agreements, maybe there could be a scheme or some kind of a portion which is allocated. We've been talking to Director Hamid Sharif's office about this quite a few times. We've had some good discussions around it. Inputs are going in. But at the end of the day, I think this is a new bank, and it has an opportunity to set a bar which is higher than anybody else and really tackling the problem head on of remedial action. Saying that, I think I've got only two more points. One is on the environmental social framework. You know, it's limited space for civil society. Yeah, the operational guidelines are not out yet. I have a feeling Stephen Lindner's office came out with the framework, which is great. We have questions about it. We'll deep dive that during tomorrow's meeting. But the operational guidelines need to be out. We need to know how the safeguards are going to be delivered on the ground. And lastly, on the phase 2 of the grievance mechanism consultation process, that's something which I wanted to propose to management here and Director Hamid Sharif's office. Asian civil society is not where it was 20 years ago when we started engaging ADB. A lot has progressed. Yes, there are challenges, but we're also organized in different ways. We hold meetings all over the world, especially in the region. So maybe AIIB can take a step forward and meet us halfway, and we can have a real dialogue. Many complainants can't even get to video conferencing for many reasons. So I'll leave that there as those key issues, and looking forward to engaging more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll address a couple of what you mentioned, and then I'll pass it to Joachim, I think, to talk about the operational guidelines, and then DJ, you can talk about some of the projects and access to information on those. In terms of engaging with CSOs and NGOs, as you know, we're new to that, and we are trying to come up with some innovative ways to find the right channels to reach out beyond just Beijing. When we did start with having a bit of a roundtable, a network of those who are based, but we know obviously our reach is much broader as a bank, and we need to be able to have conversations outside of just China. And so we're open. So let me just put it this way: we're open to come up with creative ways to have the dialogue and have those opportunities to hear what's on the ground. It's incredibly valuable for us, and it's just about finding what is the right mechanisms, what are the right times, what are the right places for us to have that. So I know that afterwards there's going to be an opportunity where we're actually asking some of those questions of you as a group to help us come up with those solutions. In terms of, I'll just say for the accountability mechanism, that's obviously being run by CEIU, which is independent from the bank. So I know that you have those open channels to Hamid in his office, and so I know he's here listening, but I'll let you deal with those directly with his, because it wouldn't be appropriate for us to comment on those. But I'm going to pass it over to Joachim, and he can talk about the operation guidelines.
No, thanks for raising those issues. I think the President set the tone for how we want to interact with civil society, our mindset, and I think we in management share that with the tone that he sets. What is important is we are still a startup organization, so just the number of staff and the development of our institution makes us different from other large MDBs that you interact with, and just cut us some slack for that, but in a practical, sensible way. We are also, not just are we a startup organization, but we have the ambition to implement a somewhat different business model. And this relates to the lean slogan of the green, clean, lean. And it's something we are spending a lot of time thinking about. What does it really mean to build a modern, lean organization that is as committed or more as others to the green and to the clean and to other very important principles of very complex operations that arise when you invest in large-scale infrastructure. So the sort of leanness, I think, requires innovation in how we work with other partners, how we use capacity of local organizations, how we work with other similar organizations like the other MDBs we are co-financing with, how we use the think tanks and consultant service that exist today that didn't exist when the World Bank was created. So the same innovation spirit, I think we should apply to our interaction. And this relates to the use of video conferences and communication and the interaction, again, with local partners in countries. So I would invite you to think also together with us what lean means, lean but effective. Lean doesn't mean low cost and not doing things. Lean means doing it more clever and differently. On the disclosure side, just one point I want to add. We are committed to disclosing project summary information once we approve a project concept. That is the right time, because doing it earlier really means disclosing something where management has not yet taken a view on it. And it doesn't make sense to share until we actually have something to share. Now, we still have a very fast project cycle time, meaning projects enter our program quite quickly and relatively quickly move forward toward approval, compared again to other organizations. So I just want to pose that here. That is a little bit part of our lean model also. I think we will have something of a faster cycle. And again, I would challenge us both to think about how we can ensure adequate information sharing and accountability. And I think that's probably valuable input for then designing the policy. And then the conversation on the complaints mechanism with Hamid, I don't want to preempt here. Let me just, from an operational and policy perspective, emphasize that I hope we can take a broad look at the entire spectrum of issues that arise in project implementation, as opposed to this narrow look narrow focus that I heard in your question on sort of the accountability mechanism when something goes really wrong in a big way. And sort of from my own experience, I would encourage us to think at the entire spectrum, meaning from just very practical project implementation issues when a contractor steps into someone's backyard and does some damage, which is something that should be resolved locally, where we should have built into projects a mechanism that you can actually deal with these small-scale local issues at the right level, to issues that need attention of the AIIB's teams, all the way to issues that actually are about accountability when really somebody screws up badly. And think about this in an integrated way, and think about what's the right remedy for different situations. It's just an encouragement to think about this broadly. And last point I just want to make on the environmental and social policy implementation. These implementation guidelines and documents are in the works, and they need to be developed together with other implementation guidelines that we are working on. That's why we haven't finalized them on other guidelines on our overall project processing, into which the environmental and social policies fit. But I do want to emphasize we are committed to the policies and their implementation, period. The absence of a guideline does not absolve us from implementing the policy. I think that's something I want to just unambiguously state here. And those policies are valid today.
I'm certain you answered everything. You still want me to talk? Anyway, I'm thankful to Hassan has given me the certificate that projects are running faster than the flow of information. I think I wish President Jin would have been there to listen that. He would have kept that in evaluating my performance in a better manner. It is a fact that we are running faster because we are lean, we could run faster. Regarding the complaints mechanism, all the questions you have raised, I think Hamid is sitting at the back, quietly watching. Even though you are going to have an exclusive session tomorrow, you can answer all these questions today itself. What I want is that we need to develop a working relationship with the NGOs and CSOs, with the operation team, particularly the operation team and NGOs, because they are on the cutting edge and they are on the front end. I think how to develop confidence in the mind of the operation team and working together as a partners in the overall development of this world, particularly for the people who are downtrodden and who are deprived of development for centuries together. I think if we develop this attitude in the minds, I think we will achieve most of our objectives in a better manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DJ. We've already sort of, Joachim's already talked a little bit about the session on social responsibility, and I'm aware we're running out of time, and I want to leave it open for more questions. So I'm going to invite Mr. I'm sorry, I may not say your name right, Mr. Hemanta Wasanege from the Friends of the Earth to ask this question.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I have a few points. I'll quickly go through them. And the first is about, because there is the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. I have seen in my country that some of the infrastructure have built unnecessarily, and lately we have airports with no planes landing. We have a harbor with no ships coming. My point is about that when you put an infrastructure, over infrastructure is a problem. So how do we overcome this issue? Because at the national level, maybe political priorities are there, they want to have more and more infrastructure, but at the same time it's not useful to the country. That leads me to the second point, is about the country's indebtedness, because when you get the loans from the banks, different multilateral banks, you have to pay them back, and the poor countries, sometimes the low income countries, they don't have money to pay them back. Now we are trying to sell those to countries, sell those to projects to China. The harbor and the airport both in Hambantota. So those countries where the human rights violations are still happening, or sometimes killing is happening, or the frontline communities are in trouble. So on the social responsibility point of view, I want to raise this issue. And what's
Sorry.
one last point? Yeah, just
The last one, because we want to make sure that people...
Definitely. But this is the most important one, because I know you are talking about the safeguards, but I want to raise the point about the indigenous people, which is not much discussed in this AIIB. We know in other MDBs you have this one, particularly if you go to India or Indonesia, you see a lot of indigenous people, but unless we're touching those issues at the upfront in these development decisions, so your projects are going to be in trouble. So how do you overcome this issue? Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. A very good and interesting list. So I'll address a couple of them and I'll pass them off to my colleagues. I love that you raised gender. Amen for that. I've put in many conferences and sit and see men. You know, it is something that we at AIIB are also very cognizant of, and we do need to do a better job at increasing the gender balance within our own organization. And I know that our recruitment team is looking and coming up with some new strategies to bring in more women into the bank. It's something I'm personally very passionate about, and if you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see me asking, where are the women when I attend certain events. So I do want to talk about address the gender one in particular. I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues, probably to Joaquin. You can sort of talk about it, some of the strict safeguards and country indebtedness parts, and then maybe DJ can address some of the other pieces.
Yeah, many thanks for raising issues. Each one of them, I think, is a topic for an entire conversation. So just headlines, and I hope we can drill deeper on a different occasion. Overinvestment in infrastructure. Look, you have to see all the different scenarios. There's a history of white elephant investments in some countries in the world, meaning the kinds of projects you're describing, projects that are wasted public resources because they're not generating economic benefits. Then there's a huge array of situations, which is the majority of what we are facing, where infrastructure is resolving existing bottlenecks. Cities that are already congested, people that are not served with electricity, people who don't have water connection. That's the bulk of the situations we're working in. And then there's a third situation, which is where countries successfully invest forward-looking into infrastructure. And there's a history, including in China, of quite significant investments that are made ahead of economic development, and in fact have driven economic and social development in quite a positive way. Now, good economic analysis is meant to differentiate these three cases and tell you whether a project proposal is one or the other. But I can tell you this is hard. And the trust in my own discipline, economics, is quite limited to really be able to detect whether these forward-looking investments are going to result in induced economic development or in a white elephant. I think there's a big research program, and I'm very keen to partner with those who are thinking about these issues to help us think through those. But the simple analysis, the simple response is good economic analysis that at least makes the assumptions explicit, and we're doing that. So in our concept, or in our discussions of the investment committee, we ask, is the assumption of the economic analysis on how much tonnage goes through this port realistic? And we have good debates on that. Debt sustainability is a key concern for two reasons. One, we are a bank. We need to be paid back, otherwise our institution is not sustainable. So we have a chief risk officer and a set of policies to very carefully look at the ability of the borrower to pay back. Secondly, it's important because we care about development of our member countries. And we all know the damage that debt crises have done to social and economic development in countries. So for those two reasons, we very deeply care about debt sustainability as a key issue in the assessment of any loans we are making. And it's another example of an area where we are connecting to other institutions, from rating agencies to the IMF to the World Bank, to assure that we have all the information of whether it is responsible, both from a creditor but also from a development perspective, to make loans in a given situation and given country. I think you've mentioned a couple of issues really related to the environmental and social policy, climate resilience of projects, considerations of human rights type situations. There, our environmental social policies are the core instrument. A lot more to be said, but I think I'll leave it at that. Last, one piece of information on women in development. we have just been able to recruit a very experienced person who actually has a lot of background in this area. So we hope by having on the staff someone with a lot of experience on gender issues in investment projects that we will naturally, I think that's the way of making sure we perform adequately and with sensitivity to the gender dimension of our projects. So that's something where we're making progress now.
Regarding the design of the program, of course, eloquently Joachim has answered. But whether it is a MDB finance or non-MDB finance, it all depends upon the design. If you do not pay more attention while designing the project, then we end up either over-designing or under-designing. It depends upon the quality and capacity of the staff to do the project and capacity of the borrowing country, how to design it. That's very important. Capacity building plays a very, very vital role. Sometimes countries may design a big project because of the concessional finance. But fortunately, we are not providing concessional finance. We are providing market-related lending. So I think countries will be very, very careful. Some of the countries which you visited, they are very careful. We don't want this program. We don't want to borrow because we don't want to increase our debt sustainability. Over the last 50 years, I think IMF or other members are hammering on them not to borrow more, not to borrow more. Or they might have realized borrowing more, how badly it is bringing their own countries down. Maybe our NGOs might have taught the leaders, the political leaders, that don't borrow. And they are very conscious, many countries, not to borrow, not to compel us. Only if those projects are bankable, which is financially feasible, which President Singh told at the very beginning, financially feasible, environmentally friendly, only those projects we are touching. Recently, 2 projects we passed. We have a specific para about disaster resilient of that project, whether it is a flood or seismic reaction. All those things we carefully capture all these elements and we incorporate it in the project. I think this is what the dialogue with you helps the people to improve the project preparation quality much more and more. We are learning and we will continue to learn. You will see that all these points are taken care while designing our projects.
Thank you. I know that Joachim has a 6:30. I think we can take one last one I had from Eugene Siminoff, and then if you keep your question short, and then we can answer, and then Joachim will, I know, and DJ have to leave.
Thank you. Thank you for being today with us. We must admit that you really started listening to what at large civil society that small fraction of civil society that presently has access to your ears has to say. At the same time, I believe it's very important to make this process, as many other processes, more efficient. And this, as far as I understand, one is slogans, because you mean that